Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 3 of the anime series, Arslan Senki, or the heroic legend of Arslan, and the plot most certainly thickens in this episode. We have some new characters debuted on both the sides, seemingly of good and bad, depending on whose side you're on watching the series. That is to say, good probably being on the side of Arslan and everything. And, it's just insane. I mean, from the opening, sort of scenes with this new character who debuts, who I guess is the sort of antagonist or villain of the piece, Lord Silvermask. We see this opening sequence of it's almost like a cultist chant going on, calling forth the demons or perhaps devil worship or something. Maybe it's a chant to some other gods that are set against essentially the kingdom of Pars and what have you. I'm not exactly sure, but it's definitely calling forth something otherworldly to, I guess, strengthen the resolve of the Lusitanians or Lord Silvermask in his attempt at, basically undermining King Andragoras and the kingdom of Pars, which he successfully does in this episode. And it's insane because we see that certain elements are interposed within that faction. We not only have the turncoat Carlin, but he has some underlings working for him, that when the king has no other choice, given the fog on the battlefield and given how prepared the Lusitanians were, he begrudgingly, when Varese basically reminds him, the queen is all by herself, and Lord forbid these people have their way with the kingdom while the king's away on the battlefield. So begrudgingly, very apprehensively, the king, and angrily I might add, the king orders a retreat, but this is then undermined by those underlings of Carlin, who are spreading the word that the king has basically shown weakness. He has run. He is a coward. And it's insane. It does nothing to boost the morale of his soldiers, of his troops, some of the most elite of which start bickering amongst themselves. Like, why should we even work for a king who's going to run away at a moment's notice? None of them, well, with the exception of one, none of them questioned the validity of this claim that he ran away as a coward. With all the history this king has, is like walking into a battlefield and walking out again almost untouched and successful. Why would anyone not call it into question, being reported that he ran away as a coward? I think, if his troops were really genuinely loyal to him, they would pause for a moment and be like, well, that doesn't sound like our king. Let's see what's actually going on before we decide to run off on our own and, as nomads or what have you. But of course, we do see that building up to Daryun's finding and catching up with Arslan and saving his life, Varese had suggested to Daryun to go ahead and do that. And I kind of felt, with the tail end of the last episode, it seemed very much like Daryun was following his own sort of course to realize, something was wrong and he was going to go track down Arslan himself. And I kind of felt like it also pseudo-undermined Daryun's coming across, the decision-making of doing this on his own, because we already had in the previous episode a segment after Daryun himself is sort of, the stripes are stripped off of him as far as he goes to the king and he tells the king, maybe we should retreat, we should consider retreating given the circumstances with the fog on the battlefield, everything like that. And he's stepped down a peg by the king. Shortly after this, Varese voices his concerns for Arslan and tells Daryun to promise to protect the boy. Again, as I said in my previous episode discussion video, not so much the kingdom, protect the boy. And I just feel like getting that reminder that Varese was, kind of prompting Daryun to go after Arslan, it made Daryun seem less the one making that call as we were left at the end of the previous episode. But, maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. Suffice to say, Daryun does catch up with Arslan, as we saw, and he manages effectively to chase Carlin off in a very weird way. And one of the things Carlin says before he finally does take off is something about, he says to Daryun, if you only knew the consequences of these actions, if you would hear me out, you would understand what's actually going on here, the importance or the ramifications. Something is amiss with this entire scenario, and I'm curious to find out, what it is. Why exactly it seems like Carlin believes this is an integral thing to happen. Whether that means to take down the kingdom of Pars entirely, whether it just meant to get that particular, king and Arslan, his son, out of the way and try to pass the governance of this kingdom to someone else. I don't exactly know what the motivations are, but as I say, we see this Lord Silvermask. He has pretty much figured out the escape route for Andragoras and Varese and the last of the troops, and they ambush them, and Varese shows how skilled, how much of a master swordsman and fighter he is. He takes out a whole host of these guards surrounding Lord Silvermask. Of course, he is then taken out by Silvermask, and you have Andragoras kind of sitting there incredulous, like, who the hell are you? And this just prompts the anger and the rage within Silvermask even more, because he thinks Andragoras should know who he is. And that says to me, this Silvermask character must have been slighted, must have had his family killed or something to prompt his wanting to go after Andragoras specifically, and it was probably something that happened peripherally to Andragoras himself. So he's not going to necessarily know who this kid or this guy is with this mask and everything like that, and we, the viewer, have no idea who the hell he is. Of course, I'm calling back on the one little escapee Lusitanian that Arslan let go, in the first episode, only this cat has brown hair, so, he might be dying it, who knows, if that turns out to be him. If not, just throwing that speculation out there. But by the end, we basically see what appears to be Silvermask taking down the king. And we hear some of the other soldiers, they're talking about what they've done, the costs of war, having to kill, women and children, and how that scarred them even now, and how can the Lord, their savior, the one they pray to, be on their side if they're doing such despicable things. And but this coincides with a call that the king has been successfully taken down. Does that mean he was taken hostage? Did they kill him? I don't know. It remains to be seen. But we basically have, it leave off with Daryun and Arslan themselves on the run. They don't know anything about what's going on. And basically Daryun wants to catch up with this crotchety old man, as he's described him to Arslan, this character Narcissus. And I think it's kind of funny how they're describing him as like an artist. He's out in the woods. He's doing paintings that aren't necessarily very good. And he has this level of self-importance. I'm like, narcissistic, narcissism, kind of funny that, but they are basically met by this young boy Elam, who is, ready to fend off any potential encroachers upon, Narcissus' land, his little hideout or whatever you want to call it, out in the woods. And when Daryun introduces himself, the kid's like, oh, I didn't even recognize you. Let's go ahead and take you to my boss, kind of. The head guy, Narcissus. And but he does have one little imparting tagline that gets Arslan's notice about how Narcissus freed him. He was a slave or something along those lines. And you see Arslan kind of like, whoa. It calls back on that element in the first episode where Arslan let that potential Lusitanian slave boy go. And so we basically meet very briefly Narcissus, with the promise of more to come in the next episode, and I'm curious to see where it goes from here. I had offered the speculation, was, Arslan's sort of heroic quest, was his journey going to involve having to become the king in place of his father, whether his father had been defeated and, would they become nomads for a time before he could sort of, like the Conan the Barbarian thing, he became a king on his own accord. Is that Arslan's journey? Is it finding the strength within himself through the people he can most closely knit trust, and then claiming the throne that his father has been dethroned, essentially, through the enemy forces? Will there be unity between those forces under the, call of Arslan in the future? Who knows? I'm just really curious to see where this story goes. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of episode 3 of Arslan Senki, or the heroic legend of Arslan, if you've seen it. And otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. So hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.